email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
My guest today is someone who has spent his career helping people be clearer, more confident, and most importantly, more human when they communicate. Rob Biesenbach is a communication expert, author, and actor who brings together a unique mix of experience. He's worked at the highest levels of public relations and speech writing, served clients from the Fortune 500 to small nonprofits, and performed on stages as a Second City trained actor. Rob's work focuses on helping people tell better stories, give stronger presentations, and connect with their audiences in a way that sticks. He's the author of 3 books, all aimed at making communication less about scripts and more about showing up with honesty and impact. His latest, Unleash the Power of Storytelling, Win Hearts, Change Minds, Get Results, was an Amazon bestseller and the reason I'm having you talk today. He believes you don't have to be theatrical to be effective, you just have to be real. Rob, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Clint. I'm glad to be here.
We're certainly glad to have you. I really enjoyed reading the book, and I like to start off by asking all my guests the same. I think of all the people who come on the podcast as superheroes, and every superhero has an origin story. And what's yours?
My origin story is I spent much of my career in traditional corporate communications and PR in various environments, government, association, agency. And then in the early 2000s, I think when maybe a lot of people were kind of looking at life in a little bit different way, I decided to scratch a long time itch and sign up for classes at Second City. Is that the poster back there?
Okay.
And I threw myself into it. I studied there for 3 years doing improv, sketch, screenwriting, and I eventually built an entire second career. So by day, I was still this corporate communications guy. By evening and weekend, I was rehearsing and performing in theater and commercials and other things. And one day it occurred to me that everything I was doing on stage and in front of the camera is directly relevant to the problems my business clients face. Communication, smarter communication, is all about connecting with your audience, telling your story, bringing energy to a room. And I built this whole new career out of that, speaking and doing workshops and writing books, bringing those worlds together.
Well, I actually watched some of the little reel you have on your website, and I love the one where you're in the doctor's outfit. I think I've seen that one before, running through the water and somebody's running beside you. I thought that was a great commercial. So there were some really great ones. I hope people go out and look at them.
It was a painful commercial. It was, I think the winds were like 30 miles per hour. The water temperature was in the 40s and the air temperature was around 50. And it was supposed to look like a summer day. So we put our big smiles on and got soaking wet. And yeah.
Well, I'm a Southern boy, and I joined the Navy right out of high school, and actually I was in boot camp in Orlando, but then we had my basic electricity and electronics school was up in Great Lakes, which is up in your area.
Oh, yeah, right.
And, being a Southern boy, I'm used to jumping in the water, and it's bathwater temperature, right? And I jumped in the Great Lake. I'm like, holy cow. That happened once, and I was done.
I think the first time I visited the Florida Keys, I got in and I said, oh my gosh, this is like bathwater. I'm used to like, even the Atlantic Oceans where we used to go, up in Maryland and Delaware. I mean, it never got that warm.
No, it definitely in the South, at least where I'm from in South Carolina and Georgia and now Florida, it's definitely warm for sure.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to write Unleash the Power of Storytelling?
Well, I'd written a couple of other books at that time. And I think it was just my ongoing evolution of bringing these worlds together of performance and business. I have a lot of certificates and honors and awards from my communication career. On my wall, I put my acting stuff because I really think that was the turning point. And Second City changed everything about me, but it also changed the way I think about I think I was already a good storyteller, but that took it up several levels. And so I just got fascinated by the subject and had a lot of ideas and wanted to put them down on paper.
Well, I'm certainly glad you did because I learned a lot by reading it.
Great.
Let's start off. I always feel like semantics matters, and we need to make sure we speak in the same. We use the same definition for words. So, how do you define storytelling, particularly in the context of business or team communication?
Storytelling brings a narrative, big picture focus to what we do. It's about getting out of the weeds and providing the context. What's the big picture? What's the big problem we're trying to solve? What's the big opportunity we're going after? What's the big reward awaiting us at the end of the rainbow? That's the story that we need to tell. And then we can get into the stuff, the data, the facts, the figures, the stats, the tactics, and all of that other stuff. But really you want to go, the story provides the big picture. Why should people care?
Now, you also said that our brains are hardwired for stories. And why do you believe storytelling is such a powerful tool in leadership and teamwork?
Well, I think there's a lot of science behind this and neuroscience showing that stories just trigger certain things in our brains, that it releases chemicals like oxytocin, which basically softens us up, makes us more agreeable. And I think storytelling, and I'm sure I've probably read about this somewhere too, storytelling is the way our brains process all the chaotic inputs that come into us. They're our brain's CPU. We take all this stuff that comes at us and we arrange it in a framework that makes sense to us based on our viewpoints, perspectives, backgrounds, biases. This is why often crime scene testimony, crime scene witness testimony can be sometimes wrong. Because we put those things in our framework. You know, we see what we felt like we should have seen instead of what we did see. So that's sort of a double-edged sword to storytelling.
Yeah, I think the positive and the negative, I was going to bring up the negative later, but this is a good segue. On the positive side, I remember reading where you said that it's really a way it helps you sell whatever you're trying to sell, whether it's a product or, a story, because you make people open up their empathy and they feel open to you. But the negative is I was actually a little scared to read that research has proven that it's easy to plant false memories.
Yeah,
through stories.
Right. Yeah. It can be insidious. And our memories, especially, I think the farther back our stories go, the more hazy they get. So
bigger the fish.
Yeah, there ought to be some appropriate guardrails around it, but generally I stick to the positive.
Yeah, and then you kind of mentioned it in your answer as well, but there's a framework we use, and you mentioned that. I remember reading in the book that it basically says if there's something you say that I agree with, it fits into my framework, and if I don't agree with it, I just kind of dismiss it.
Yeah. And a story maybe sometimes when you're meeting oppositional forces can be a way to maybe bring down some of those walls and create some common ground and connection, and maybe eventually win people over who might be skeptical or suspicious.
And I know that stories can help us remember things, even hopefully realistically remember things.
Yeah.
I mean, you think back for millennia, we passed down our histories around the campfire where the elders would tell stories to the younger generation, and that's how we passed our histories down and knowledge. But I was a little bit surprised by the statistic that you mentioned. There was a group that attended a series of presentations, and while 63% of them remember the stories they'd heard, only 5% could recall the statistics. And I'm assuming they weren't all just bad with math. So there's something about a story that really locks in.
Yeah, because we're bombarded with information these days. I mean, so much more even than when I wrote the book in 2018. I mean, we just constant information overload. It's a very noisy world. So I think stories are something that cut through all that noise.
Yeah, we won't even get into the AI part of it because now the AI is getting in the old, not that long ago, I could look at a story that would pop up and I'd be like, that's clearly AI. It doesn't really match and this doesn't sound right. But now it's so scary. I don't know how we're going to tell truth from fiction anymore. So.
Right.
Now you do outline a clear structure for effective stories. Can you walk us kind of through that structure at a high level?
Sure. I mean, this was similar to what they taught us at Second City, that a story is simply a character in pursuit of a goal in the face of some challenge or obstacle. And the tension between the challenge and obstacle, between the goal and the challenge, is that creates the conflict that makes a story live and breathe. So character, goal, challenge, and then finally there has to be some sort of resolution to the story.
And what is it about that conflict or challenge that makes it such an essential element of a compelling story?
Well, I think we're drawn to conflict. It's basic human nature, them or us, then or now, this or that. It's like I picture in fact, I have a slide with the famous black and white cookie from Seinfeld. And that's just how we're drawn. It's very clear and simple. So that's a big part of storytelling.
Okay. What are some of the common mistakes people make when telling stories?
Their stories are too long. That's probably the most common one. Not just long, but, some people can tell really long stories. Malcolm Gladwell, I watched him tell an hour-long story once in a ballroom. And it was absolutely captivating. Most of us are not Malcolm Gladwell. So I tend to think that the shorter, the better. And but a story can go longer if you tell it well. But generally, people clutter up their story with lots of extraneous information and lots of unnecessary twists and turns.
You give some great examples about that in the book. I mean, you talk about giving information that doesn't really matter, or I think you have the analogy of a tree. You want to stay as close to the trunk as possible and get off the branches and certainly stay off the twigs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are just I was surprised that people in my workshops have found that a really helpful analogy. I was going to retire it, but then people seem to really respond to it. So
it's pretty good. I think I'd keep it.
Yeah. The tree is one. Another, if you're oriented a different way, picture train tracks. You want to stay pretty much on the rails. It's not a road trip on a scenic byway where you're zigging and zagging and enjoying the things. You're getting to your destination in a logical, straightforward way.
Now, how can somebody balance authenticity and professionalism when they're trying to share a personal story?
Yeah, I think anytime the subjects come up of revealing your humanity, showing emotion, showing some vulnerability, I think people always just go to the worst place, like we're asking people to cry in front of their coworkers. And that's not true. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have moments of uncertainty and indecision, and all of that is fair game for storytelling. And it endears you to people. It helps people relate to you, and it makes you seem more human. And people generally like to interact with humans more than things.
Yeah, because you actually, one of the quotes I have in the book was you believe that opening up and revealing your humanity is a duty of leadership.
Yeah, I think that's, people want to see who the real person is behind the title and the office and the facade and all of that.
And you also mentioned that it can't be fake, though. It has to be genuine emotion. You can't just gin it up like you're on a stage. It has to be genuine and real because people can see through that.
I think they can. I mean, unless you're just a really great actor or performer, for the most part, it should be real. And that's points actually to another big mistake people make is, in the old days they went Googling for stories, and nowadays they maybe go chat GPTing for stories. And I'm sure AI can come up with some amazing, brilliant stories, but it's the same thing with Googling them. If it's not your story, if you haven't personally experienced or witnessed it, you're never going to connect to it the way you would with a real story that comes from the heart. So tell your own stories. Those are as good, if not better, than really some story that people have probably heard 1,000 times.
It's even true for me. Early on in the podcast career, I would actually have somebody, write questions for me. And then I quickly realized it doesn't work for me because I need to know the context where the question came from. So I think even on the very first one, I abandoned that and just read the book myself and got my own questions. And because then I would know exactly what I was thinking when I asked the question and what I meant by that word as opposed to this word and where it came from in the book because I remember it. And so it's better to be genuine.
Absolutely. I agree.
Now, I do a lot of teamwork, and trust is a big deal for us. So what, if any, role does storytelling play in building trust in a team?
Well, I think, first of all, openness enhances trust, finding common ground. I did a recent workshop for PR and communications people, and we talked about finding the threads, locating the threads between what's happening right in front of you and some past experience that you could, bring to the forefront. So if you're trying to connect with somebody and you find some kind of commonality, or they express a concern about something, or they have an issue, problem, where have you heard that before? How has it come up? How is it resolved? So using that to connect with people. And it could be as simple as anything like a common, your parents were in the military? Mine too. We traveled all around. Or, oh, you like pizza? Or, oh, I know you're really budget conscious. This reminds me of, you tell a story.
Right. We're always looking for that common ground.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about all the talks you've given, coached, and seen, what's one moment that reminded you of why communication really matters?
That's a good question. I think it was early on. I have a lot of stories about why I do this and how I do this and all that stuff. Honestly, one of the appeals of getting on stage, and one of the appeals of both on stage as acting and as a speaker, was I liked being on stage. I liked performing in front of people. So I think I did start. I wanted to help people, but I was also in it for myself. I really liked being up there. I liked the focus on me. I liked the attention. And early on, these two young women came up to me after one of my sessions, and they were just at the dawn of their careers. And they were so earnest and they were so sincere. And they asked me some questions about how, as a young person, and especially as a woman, they can communicate in a way that asserts more credibility in the workplace and be more respected. And it really hit me like, oh my gosh, these people they're not just listening to me and being engaged and maybe learning a few things. They're really like looking to me for wisdom. I mean, this is a lot of responsibility. And so that really struck me that I have an opportunity here to really help people. And not in a general way, in a very specific way, to advance their careers, to advance their satisfaction with their work and their life, their relationships.
Yeah, I have, when I teach classes, you tell stories that you teach, and you're trying to take a boring topic, perhaps maybe project management like I teach, and you're trying to make a connection. And so I always tell people, look, I'm going to tell jokes throughout the course because I know it's a boring topic. And if you don't laugh, it's going to be a long 2 days for all of us. And the point is, because nothing is worse when you tell your standard jokes. It always gets laughed and you get crickets. Yeah. And you kind of feed off that energy. I'm sure you do the same. But when I teach overseas, the classes go longer because we have to teach in English, give them more time to hear what you're saying. And somebody asked me once, how do you do it? We've been here 14 hours and you're still going. I said, because you give me the energy. And I'm sure you see the same when you're on stage. That feedback is so important.
Yeah, it really is quite an amazing thing when everything is clicking. I mean, and sometimes you really have to work hard and pull it out of people, and other times it's just natural, and it's like, it has a buoyancy effect to it. It's like a wave. It just lifts everything up in the room.
And you talk in the book about you need to read the room, basically, and that if you're telling one of your stories and the audience is not giving you a good vibe, you need to figure out how to change it or just abandon it altogether. But you don't just keep telling the story because you're going to do it no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. Or shorten it or something. Yeah, you're just always adjusting. I know generally when I have more latitude, more time, more patience, more engagement, and when I don't, when I have less of that, I guess.
That's a hard lesson I learned as well. I was teaching a class for a company, and I told one of my I gave a standard example, and they found asbestos on the second floor, and it took longer to paint, blah, blah, blah. And after the after the class, somebody pulled me aside and says, "You do know we're in bankruptcy because of asbestos, right?" I said, "Ooh. I do now. I did not know." So, you got to tweak your stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, there are people that are probably natural storytellers, but what advice would you give to somebody who says, "I'm not a very good storyteller"? There's the people, those people who can't remember the punchlines and they're not good at it generally. So what are some tips and tricks for them?
Yeah. Well, first I tell people to lower their expectations. Not everybody has to tell TED Talk worthy stories or Spielbergian stories. I mean, stories are just really simple if you think of them as examples. I have a story about storytelling. I was talking to this person who said she didn't have any stories. And I said, "What do you do?" And she said, "I'm in IT." And I said, "Well, what are your big challenges?" And she lit up. She says, "Oh, users, they do the dumbest things. They download viruses, succumb to phishing scams." And I said, "Do you have any examples of people who have done careless things with their systems and caused needless headaches?" And she goes, "Well, of course." I said, "Well, those are your stories. Your story can be quite simple. This is why you need to do this. We had somebody who had this problem. It caused 8 hours of downtime." It's very simple. It's a character, problem, solution. And that's why I know you don't like all these do's and don'ts, but that's why they're really, really important.
I think two of my favorite IT terms. One is it's a 1D10T problem. And when you write down 1D10T, it spells out idiot. And the other one is a PEBCAS, PEBKAS. Problem exists between keyboard and seat. So,
yeah, I think I've heard that one. Yeah.
What's one challenge that surprises you by how often it shows up, regardless of the industry or title?
A challenge that comes up. I think people's fear of storytelling. Even gregarious people, like salespeople. Salespeople should be natural storytellers. PR people should be natural storytellers. But again, it's just this ingrained fear. This is what I call TEDsteria, that if my story doesn't blow people out of the water or make them cry, it's not a good story. And that's absolutely not true. Just people need to relate to it and say, "I get it. I've been there. I know just what you mean."
Yeah, not everybody has to be in the Speaker Hall of Fame. I know a couple of them, and they're great storytellers. But we don't all have to aspire to that. We just need to get our story across to solve whatever problem we have.
Yeah, to clarify, to amplify, to connect, all of those.
In your work helping leaders prepare for high stakes talks, what's one overlooked detail that often makes or breaks their performance?
Audience. It seems fundamental, I think, to some people, but others not so much. I sit down with an executive and they'll say, "This is what I want to tell them, and this is what they need to know." I always back it up and say, "Before we talk about what you want, I want to know what they want." Because if we don't deliver on that, we're dead in the water. Who are these people? What are their needs, interests, concerns, objections, pain points? What's their mood? All of those things have to be weighed because that shapes your content. It shapes your approach, your tone, everything else.
Yeah, you mentioned listening to Malcolm Gladwell talk for an hour, but if it was a topic you didn't care about, you may walk out going, "Well, that was great. He's a great orator, but I still didn't get my question answered."
Yeah, could be. Right. Exactly. Our expectations were pretty low at that point, so that's fine. We're just, a speaker at a big ballroom dinner. You don't always expect a lot, but then he delivered and it was great.
He is quite good at it. So
yeah,
he might have a career in this.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Tina Fey might have a career in, stand up.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how can teams incorporate storytelling into the meetings, presentations, project updates? These things can typically be kind of boring, and I find that stories can really help keep people engaged.
Yeah, I think one of the most effective things we can do is to tell a story right at the top of a presentation, one that explains to people why we're here and what the problem is we want to solve. It could be a past experience, something you've observed, something is happening at a competitor's organization, whatever it might be. So start with story. end with story and have stories in between. I saw a formula somewhere that it's assertion, data, story. And I'm not sure it needs to be in that rigid order. And I'm not sure I do a story for every assertion, just like you might not do a data point for every assertion. But I think it's good to spice things up. People ask how many stories should I have in a presentation? I don't know. Have one at the beginning and the end, and maybe one in each key section of your presentation. So I don't know, 3, 5. They don't have to be stem winders. They're not 10-minute stories. They can be a 30-second story. Go on.
Yeah. Even had some tips in there around data, because I'm an engineer, so I'm always attracted to numbers. But you had some suggestions about rounding numbers and rather than say 53%, say half, and you had some suggestions there. So highly recommend people read the book, because there's a lot of good pickups there.
Yeah. Rounding data. It's not, this is not a fact sheet or a white paper, and especially if they've got the numbers on the slides. You can round off, you can approximate, you can scale. Our new factory is as long as 6 football fields. It's not whatever that would be, 592 yards.
You had a great example of, I think it was Lake Superior, and you talked about, you read it was 6 gagillion, I don't have the note in front of me, but like 6 gagillion gallons, and that was 2.7 billion Olympic swimming pools. This is from memory, so I don't know if this is right.
Right.
But then you said there was enough water to cover all of North and South America 1 foot deep. That's much more memorable, and we can get our arms around that a lot easier than the first 2 numbers.
Yeah, and I found that story on a road trip through Duluth. It was right on the shores of Lake Superior, and they were just talking about how big and deep it is, and that was fascinating. I find stories everywhere, and many of my stories were about stories, so that was a great one.
And there's another tip. I wasn't going to ask this, but it makes sense now. There was another one you talk about the words matter, and if it's around a sense. And I don't have any examples because I didn't write this down to ask, but basically it was anything that evokes a sense, whether it's a smell or a feel. Mm-hmm. You have a word. You like cool, which is better than groovy, or there's another word. But anyway, and you say it's because it evokes a sense of being cold. It's easier to remember.
I think I was quoting another expert, somebody who I saw speak and was really smart on this. And boy, I wish I could remember the name. Maybe we can put it in the notes. I'd have to look in the index. But yeah, these sensory words have a big impact, or just evoking senses. If you say it was the first hot morning of summer, I woke up, threw open the window, and deeply inhaled the smell of cut grass. Suddenly, everyone can smell that almost. I mean, they could feel it. They know where you are and what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it was when you said something like it's 10 a.m. and Alice is making popcorn again. And I remember thinking, boy, if you did put the word burnt in there, like I can smell burnt popcorn. Right. That's one of those smells, just like, ugh.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. The office microwave. My goodness.
Yep. Yeah. Fish and burnt popcorn. Those are 2 bad things.
Yeah.
So I love stories, and clearly you do as well. But are there places, and I don't think this is the right answer, but in like a business setting, or are there places where storytelling is not appropriate?
I don't know. I mean, I told stories in my wedding toast. I've told stories in eulogies. Is there a place where stories don't belong? Can't think of one.
I'm with you. Well, that concludes part 1 of my conversation with Rob Biesenbach, communication expert, Second City actor, and best-selling author of Unleash the Power of Storytelling. Coming up in part 2, Rob gives advice on how to be an authentic storyteller, even if that means breaking some of the traditional rules.
This one speaker, she pointed at us, and that's a big no-no. You never, ever, ever point at your audience, because it's threatening, it's intimidating, it's all these things. And so I asked anybody who noticed that she pointed, and they said, yeah. I said, did you feel threatened or intimidated? Or no? I mean, because she was bright and enthusiastic and warm and authentic, and pointing didn't matter. And the same thing about if you want to stick your hand in your pocket or cross your arms, all those taboos.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And Crossing your arms is a sign of you being closed and stubborn, and it's not going to come across that way unless you are actually closed and stubborn.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.